Good evening. My name is Hannah Whiteman, and I serve as the Assistant Secretary of State for Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor. I'm here to provide a briefing on the evolving crisis in Erehwon and to present the considerations surrounding a potential intervention based on the Responsibility to Protect Doctrine, or R2P. This doctrine emphasizes the international community's responsibility to prevent mass atrocities such as war crimes, genocide, and crimes against humanity. This was famously invoked during the 2011 Libya intervention, an event that continues to shape global perspectives on humanitarian intervention. Some background on our current situation. Erehwon is a smaller country on the Horn of Africa of about 2 million people, and they are currently plagued by a brutal civil war between their government forces and rebel groups. This conflict has escalated to the committing of widespread atrocities on both sides, recklessly targeting civilians and fighters alike. The UN Human Rights Council has established a commission of inquiry to investigate these alleged violations of international law. We, however, are faced with the difficult decision of whether or not to invoke R2P and pursue an intervention. To evaluate that decision, it is important for us to reflect on what happened during the Libya intervention. Some view this as a successful implementation of R2P, while others see it as a complete failure, with it doing more harm than help. In regards to Libya, there was much debate. However, the UN Security Council did authorize a no-fly zone and the use of force to protect civilians from Muammar Gaddafi's forces, which were advancing towards rebel-held cities. This intervention was led by NATO, and they succeeded in stopping the immediate threat to civilians, especially in cities such as Benghazi. At that moment, the intervention was widely considered a successful implementation of R2P. The aftermath of Libya, however, displayed a clear failure to prevent a prolonged civil war and a collapse of the state. The intervention had been thought out and executed well, but no one thought of what happened the day after the intervention. This failure to account for what happened next led to widespread instability and a prolonged conflict, with civilians continuing to suffer for years after Gaddafi's fall. So to answer the question of was a success for R2P, in that moment, yes, it did save lives and prevented what could have been a massacre. However, the mismanagement of what happened post-conflict is a prime example of the challenges we face with R2P. The failure in Libya made it very clear that military intervention must be paired with long-term peace-building efforts to avoid creating further suffering for those we are aiming to help. These shortcomings of R2P played out in Libya, creating skepticism regarding R2P's ability to be applied in complex conflicts. Another major challenge faced in Libya was where the lines were drawn with NATO's mission. There are varying opinions on whether or not NATO went beyond their mission and assisted in the changing of regimes. Regardless if that's true or not, it did set the precedent that it is even possible to manipulate R2P. This presents several issues. Most basically, it infringes on a country's sovereignty, but also impacts intention and can cause problems further down the road. Now, as we look at Erehwon, we are faced with a very similar situation to Libya. We have a civil war with atrocities on both sides, in this case, particularly in the region of Jamal, where the government's airstrikes have targeted civilians, and the international community is now calling for action to protect these civilians. As we move forward in developing a plan for Erehwon, it is important that we learn from the experiences in Libya. It is important that we ensure that any intervention is carefully designed and executed to prioritize civilian protection, while also fully addressing the post-conflict needs. The lessons from Libya were very clear. We cannot let the intervention become something it was never meant to be. Any intervention must focus only on stopping the violence and preventing further atrocities from occurring. We must avoid, at all costs, the mission getting off track. A possible action we could take is implementing a no-fly zone. This would be aimed at stopping civilian areas from being bombed, and it would allow affected regions to receive humanitarian aid. It'd be important, if intervention was to take place, that there was a unified support coalition in order to have widespread legitimacy. Equally as important as a no-fly zone, we must have a post-conflict plan to stabilize the future of Erehwon. We need governance reforms, humanitarian aid, and more to ensure that Erehwon has the resources and programs it needs to have long-term peace and security. Some challenges we may face are gaining unilateral support due to Erehwon's ties with Russia and China, regional powers opposition, and limited U.S. strategic interest. However, U.S. involvement is critical to maintaining our global influence, and failing to act could have lasting complications and consequences. In conclusion, the Libya intervention offers us both lessons and a cautionary tale for any R2P based intervention. If we decide to intervene in Erehwon, we must stay focused on the protection of civilians, avoid overstepping mission parameters, and plan diligently for what happens after the conflict. I recommend that we proceed with caution. Thank you.